Caves and underwater passages can spark our curiosity, stirring a sense of wonder and a desire for adventure. Yet beneath their hidden beauty lurk real risks that demand caution. The stories that follow show how quickly a thrilling exploration can turn tragic. From sudden flooding to disorienting tunnels, caving and diving adventures test both skill and nerve. Shaft Sinkhole tragedy. Mount Gambier's Shaft Sinkhole fascinated many diving enthusiasts. It was famous for its small surface opening that led into an underground chamber with a striking lake about 20 feet below. Anyone who descended just inside would see an enchanting beam of light streaming from the opening above, illuminating the water. It helped orient divers, guiding them back to the exit when they stayed in the main area. Yet this sinkhole also featured deep side branches, extending into darker zones with less visibility. On May 28, 1973, a group of 9 experienced divers arrived with the plan to explore and enjoy the main chamber. They agreed to maintain a maximum depth of around 200 feet. At that depth, they could rely on the beam of light. Plus, they would avoid serious complications from nitrogen narcosis, a condition that occurs at deeper depths when using ordinary air cylinders. Nitrogen narcosis, often called rapture of the deep, dulls a diver's thinking and reaction time. It can make them act as though they are intoxicated, leading to poor decisions. The first day of diving went smoothly, as the group stuck to their plan. The main chamber offered enough space to swim around and appreciate the bizarre underwater formations. Everyone felt comfortable and safe, able to look up and confirm the reassuring presence of that natural spotlight from the tiny surface opening. And with good visibility in the high-ceilinged main cave, there was little risk of kicking up silt that could blind them. Trouble arose on the following day. 4 members of the team decided that they wanted to attempt a new personal record by venturing into the western portion of the cave at a depth of roughly 250 feet. In 1973, it was standard to use normal air tanks, containing about 21% oxygen, 78% nitrogen, and 1% other gases, rather than advanced mixed gases that modern extreme divers might use. Going down to 250 feet on regular air could sharply increase the risk of nitrogen narcosis and other physiological issues. Nevertheless, the 4 divers chose to descend beyond the plan's limit, likely excited by the challenge and the possibility of discovering something new or simply achieving bragging rights. The rest of the group was concerned but could not force them to stay. Divers often pride themselves on independence, and these 4 seemed determined to push their boundaries. As they descended toward 250 feet, their bodies absorbed more nitrogen. The deeper water pressure was forcing nitrogen into their bloodstream. Typically, narcosis grows gradually, bringing mental confusion, slowed reflexes, and sometimes euphoria, all of which can lead a diver to ignore critical warning signs. In an environment where calm decision-making is key, that is a recipe for disaster. One of the experienced team members felt the initial unmistakable shadows of narcosis clouding his thoughts. He decided he was done, giving a signal to turn back. Some divers joined him. Unfortunately, 4 individuals pressed on, full of adrenaline and determination. They underestimated how quickly their air supply could dwindle at such a depth and possibly overlooked the terrifying effect of stirring up silt. Underwater caves often have layers of silt or loose particles that have collected for hundreds of years. If a moving diver's fins or body brushed against the floor or walls, that silt could rise in a cloudy swirl, blocking visibility almost instantly. It turns an already risky place into a place of total disorientation. And that is precisely what happened. Back at the surface, tension built among the divers who returned. They waited for their 4 friends but saw no sign of bubbles or lights. Worried that time was slipping away, they re-entered the cave in search of them. Once inside, they discovered a dropped flashlight and a camera resting on the bottom, but no divers. At deeper depths, that thick swirl of silt made it impossible to see more than a foot or 2. The searchers also had limited air, and they had to manage their own risk of narcosis. Unable to continue safely, they retreated to the surface. No one truly knows the exact final moments of the 4 missing divers. Most likely, the silt turned the environment pitch black, removing any sense of direction. Narcosis may have slowed their reactions, made them panic, or caused them to consume air too quickly. If they lost sight of each other, they could not share air effectively, further complicating the situation. While a calm mind might have suggested tying an emergency line to slowly retrace their path, confusion under narcosis can derail any survival plan. Eventually, the official recovery teams went in under more controlled conditions. They discovered that all 4 divers had drowned. The tragedy spread shockwaves through the diving community, leading many instructors to emphasize the dangers of relying on standard air at extreme depths. Friendships and families were shattered by the loss, and discussions about stricter protocols grew more urgent. People realized that diving's golden rule, never exceed your training and experience, existed for a reason. When divers stray from well-established guidelines, the margin for error shrinks dramatically. In the wake of the Shaft Sinkhole incident, more dive operators started recommending advanced certifications for anything beyond 130 feet. Additional training covered the use of specialized gas mixtures that help counteract narcosis. Visibility concerns also took center stage. Divers learned to maintain better buoyancy control to minimize stirring up silt, and some began using guidelines, especially in overhead environments. Even if you have a good sense of direction, the slightest shift of silt can cause confusion beyond measure. The loss at Shaft Sinkhole stands as a heartbreaking reminder that curiosity, the 4 divers who ventured too deep, remind us how a single choice in an unforgiving environment can lead to irreversible consequences. Today, countless divers still visit similar sinkholes and caverns for these hidden realms beneath the Earth's surface. Gollum's Cave. Often called the Cave of Death, Gollum's Cave drew a group of 5 friends on August 18, 2005. Locals and caving experts knew the cave for its tight, water-filled passageways and pockets of poor air quality. Yet the group seemed undeterred, arriving at 3 a.m. to begin a nighttime exploration. One of them decided that the cave felt too ominous from the start and stayed behind, while the other 4 pressed deeper. The entrance required them to crawl through a small pool of water. Right away, they experienced the claustrophobic conditions. However, curiosity and group momentum can be strong motivators, and they continued onward. They chose the left path, which led to another small body of water. Beneath this unassuming pool was a narrow underwater tunnel about 15 feet long and only 3 or 4 feet in diameter. Anyone going through it had to become completely submerged, swimming single file to reach the other side. On the outside, the friend who did not enter kept glancing at the cave opening. Time passed with no sound or movement. The darkness and the quiet made him uneasy. He started to feel that something was not right. After mustering courage, he tried to go in far enough to call out, but no response came. Unsure of what else to do, he reached out to cavers he knew, then contacted the authorities. It was clear that if his 4 friends were in trouble, from the inside perspective, the 4 who went forward discovered a new space on the other side of the tunnel. There was a small air pocket, about 3 feet of clearance between the water below and the ceiling above. Unfortunately, that pocket did not have good ventilation and was likely filled with excessive carbon dioxide. With high CO2 levels, your breathing rate can rise, your mind can fog, and you can feel an urgent sense of suffocation. In addition, if the oxygen level was low, their bodies and brains would have trouble functioning properly. Realizing they were in danger, they tried to return through the underwater tunnel. But a key challenge with underwater caves is often finding the exact spot where you entered. If the tunnel entrance is only a small opening, one misjudgment is all it takes to miss it. The body also reacts differently when carbon dioxide is elevated. You cannot hold your breath as long, your sense of direction falters, and panic can set in quickly. It seems that the first friend to attempt the swim back got disoriented or could not locate the tunnel exit in time. That person likely ran out of breath, swallowed water, and drowned. The next friend, trying to help or trying to exit, might have encountered the same fate, and so on, until all 4 were lost in the same horrifying chain of events. In short order, Gollum's Cave claimed another set of lives. By the time the police and rescue teams arrived, it was too late for a straightforward, safe rescue. They used pumps to lower water levels or to increase the oxygen supply, but the cave's layout restricted how effective these measures could be. Family members gathered, hoping for positive news, but the best search teams could only do body recoveries at that point. Eventually, local authorities decided to seal Gollum's Cave with cement, eliminating its entry to prevent future tragedies. Gollum's Cave stands out as a cautionary tale of how certain places are simply too dangerous for casual adventure. While some might believe all places should be open to exploration, repeated tragedies in these tight, waterlogged passages suggest otherwise. The combination of narrow tunnels, water, and stale or bad air is incredibly dangerous. Even well-trained, physically fit explorers can be overpowered by these conditions in minutes. Jacob's Well Tragedy. Jacob's Well in Texas may appear, at first glance, like a simple, shallow, circular opening in the ground. Visitors often see what looks like a gentle pool that appears to be about 25 feet deep. Many swimmers step in, convinced they can easily touch the bottom and resurface for a fun story to share. But beneath that welcoming entrance lies a treacherous network of underwater chambers that have claimed more than a few lives. On November 23, 1983, two university students, Richard and Clark, decided to explore Jacob's Well. They had logged a fair amount of open water dives and were working on earning their open water instructor certification. However, cave diving is a discipline in its own right. Jacob's Well contains several rooms, or chambers. The first two are fairly spacious, with enough room for divers to move around and a portion of overhead that some see as only mildly dangerous, requiring divers to pass through a small opening to get inside. Then there is the rumor of a fourth chamber that is so tight and unstable, most serious divers warn you to never attempt entry. Gravel slides and loose rock can sift down at any moment. Who was not only a cave rescue diver, but also a man who had personally witnessed tragedy at Jacob's Well. Messages were sometimes left behind, daring future divers to continue deeper, ignoring the warnings from experts like Don. Despite these cautionary tales, Richard and Clark set out that day to see if they could go just a bit deeper than the usual open water swimmers. They had no intention of a serious foray into the most treacherous areas, but curiosity and a bit of overconfidence can sometimes nudge people toward bigger risks. They slipped beneath the still surface, entering Jacob's Well with some excitement. They passed through the first and second chambers without incident, finding the environment unusual but not impossible. They approached the third chamber, which had a squeeze that required removing their tanks from their backs. This practice is standard in some claustrophobic diving situations. Divers push or pull their tank in front of them to get through tight spots. However, it also means that if anything goes wrong, retrieving your mouthpiece or adjusting your buoyancy can become much harder. Richard went first, squirming through while clutching his tank. When Clark followed, he noticed a horrifying problem. Richard had lost control of his tank or his regulator, and he looked as if he was suffocating. Panicking underwater is often fatal. Clark lunged forward to share his own regulator, passing it back and forth. Somehow, the two of them navigated that narrow squeeze, emerging into a slightly wider area on the near side of the chamber. However, their ordeal was not over. Realizing they had limited air remaining, they attempted to backtrack toward the entrance. In the gloom of the cave, a misstep is easy. They heard a clank that signaled their tank had hit rock, a telltale sign that they were in the wrong place. They had gone up the false chimney, a route that looked like an exit but led nowhere. Meanwhile, every breath they took used what was left of their air. Clark managed to ditch the false chimney and force himself upwards in a long, desperate swim. He covered around 75 feet on a single breath, eventually breaking the surface, gasping for air and calling for help. Possibly disoriented with near-empty tanks, he could not reach the exit in time. This wrenching loss left Clark devastated and confirmed once again what Don had said. Jacob's Well was indeed extremely hazardous for those who venture beyond the safer limits. When authorities arrived, Don showed up. Seeing the scenario, he felt a terrible sense of déjà vu. The heartbreak was profound. Over the following weeks, rescue teams recovered Richard's body, and discussions resumed about how to make Jacob's Well safer, or whether it should be made inaccessible to all but the most qualified cave diving experts. But as often happens, some local divers believe in personal freedom, and the well remains accessible, though posted with warnings. The Jacob's Well tragedy has since been recounted to many new divers, teaching them that open water skills alone cannot protect you in a complex cave environment. Mossdale Cave Incident. Mossdale Cavern was a place that promised both excitement and mystery to those who wanted to explore its tight passages. On the morning of June 24th, 1967, 10 cavers gathered at the entrance, brimming with determination to clear debris from some of the deeper tunnels and update existing maps of the cave's layout. Among them were 2 leaders who already knew Mossdale Cavern's winding paths. Their presence assured many in the group that this would be a manageable journey. Right from the start, the cave's reputation for cramped spaces was clear. The cavers began their trek by crouching or crawling through areas that offered minimal headroom. Mossdale Cavern had few spots where a person could fully stand. Hours passed, and the group recognized that this exploration was far from easy. 4 of them decided that they had pushed themselves enough. They turned around, suspecting that the experience only got more challenging deeper in. Once these 4 reached the surface, they noticed a cloudy sky. However, they felt no serious alarm. Clouds appear often in that region, and at first glance the weather did not suggest a major storm. Meanwhile, the remaining 6 pressed forward into an area called the Far Marathon Passage, a notoriously tight corridor measuring approximately 18 inches by 12 inches. A narrow stream trickled along the bottom, and they had to carefully navigate around it. Inside Mossdale, you often have no room to maneuver if anything goes wrong. That day, they discovered that even a minor change in the weather can bring about a life-threatening situation. Outside, the initial group realized that a light rain had begun. Rain by itself might not be a major threat, but its effect on Mossdale Cavern could be startlingly quick. The cave's entrance lay in a spot where water would pool during rainfall, and all that water could surge into the passages. The 4 at the surface took shelter, waiting for the rain to die down. They assumed the rest of their crew had enough time to exit. They never guessed how fast the situation would escalate underground. Inside, the 6 cavers sensed that water levels were rising. Their small stream was becoming more forceful, and puddles turned into swiftly flowing channels. Deciding not to risk further exploration, they wrapped up their mapping work. But the trip back to the entrance would take about 3 hours. During that time, the rain above intensified, sending more water rushing in. What had been a small trickle transformed into an unstoppable torrent. On the surface, the 4 who had exited Mossdale Cavern watched in horror as a small lake formed around the entrance. They realized that escaping from inside could be nearly impossible if the water kept rising. Panicked, they alerted the authorities and recruited volunteers to help with an emergency rescue. Word spread fast in the local community, and soon crowds showed up with pumps, ropes, and other gear. A large-scale rescue operation began. Volunteers tried to pump the accumulating water out of the cave entrance. Others positioned hoses to send air inside, hoping that the trapped cavers had retreated to a higher chamber. Mossdale Cavern, however, gave them little reason for optimism. It was not known for large open rooms that could safely hold people above rising water. The complex also twisted and turned in ways that made locating exact positions difficult. Inside the cave, the 6 explorers likely realized they were in a race against floodwaters, searching for any higher space that could keep them free of the rushing water. This unstoppable flood pinned them against rock walls. A cave floor quickly becomes the bed of a fast-moving stream in these conditions. Even if they found a small ledge, once the water rose above it, there would be nowhere else to climb. Over the next hours, water continued to pour in, filling passageways that had only recently been passable. The cavers had no reliable exit. Outside, rescuers fought what felt like a losing battle as heavy rainfall fed the underground current. They could not clear water from the entrance faster than nature was dumping it in. The heartbreak for family, friends, and the entire caving community was acute. They stood helplessly near the entrance, hoping for a miracle that never arrived. Eventually, once the weather improved and pumps had a chance to lower the water level, the grim truth emerged. None of the 6 cavers had survived. They all drowned inside that labyrinth of soaking wet tunnels and jagged walls. The tragedy reverberated through the caving community, prompting urgent calls for improved weather monitoring and emergency plans. Some advised stricter guidelines, such as ensuring no exploration took place if there was any forecast of rain within a large surrounding area. Others spoke of installing advanced monitoring systems near the usual cave streams, but no technical measure could bring the lost lives back. The Mossdale Cave incident remains an unforgettable lesson in how quickly nature can overwhelm human explorers. Even strong, prepared individuals can be trapped by flooding, especially in constricted underground spaces. Rainfall that might feel mild above ground can turn deadly below, where water can collect, rise, and block every possible path to safety. The heartbreak surrounding Mossdale would echo for decades to come, urging cavers to maintain utmost caution in the face of unpredictable weather and the merciless conditions underground.